go. Robert, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I am hanging in there. Um,
I
yeah, that's
think
all
we
we can do these days, right?
right.
Um,
Yeah, yeah.
will you do me a favor and introduce yourself?
My name is Robert Sanchez. I'm Puerto Rican from the Bronx. I'm currently not working, but before I worked as a social worker um, at a few places. I've been doing it for about 20 years. Um, I just had a couple of major surgeries during 2020, so I'm rebounding back and feeling better than ever.
Well, first of all, thank you for making the time because if I remember right, you are taking classes, correct?
Yes, I'm taking classes at Columbia University in a program called Justice Through Code, and I'm learning Python 3. And it's eye opening because it's like learning a new language, but because of my experience, I experienced prison for 15 years, and I felt like um, we were funneled into social work. And unfortunately, social work, doing social work is kind of like an unappreciated um,
Profession.
career,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
profession, and we have a tendency to be underpaid. So
Oh,
I
without a
wanted to
doubt.
do something that would enhance my future earnings and allow me to at least one day retire um, with something, right? I don't want to be that old person eating cat food or anything like that. I mean,
Well, it sounds like you're doing the right thing then.
yeah, I feel like I am. I mean, you know what? I told a friend this the other day that I'm actually in a great place in my life, right? Like I survived 2020. I had cancer surgery. I had a kidney transplant. I broke up with my wife in December of 2019, and it was a really trying time for me. So when you come out of that and you feel good, like yesterday, I ran 7 miles,
Oh
and
wow.
I'm proud of that because it was something that I've been wanting to do. And you know what? It tells me that I'm feeling healthy and I feel good. So
Well, there's nothing
yeah,
more, much more that you can ask for, right? When you're comfortable and you're healthy. Um, I do want to kind of start from the beginning here because you've mentioned a couple of things, right? From social work, to being underpaid, to cancer, to surgeries, to jail time. Were you're are you from New York, born and raised?
I was born in the Bronx, raised in East Harlem, and I when I was 18 years old, I was arrested under the Rockefeller drug laws, which was a mandatory minimum for A1 felony of 15 to life
Wow.
and a maximum of it could be anywhere between 25, 50 to life. And as a first time nonviolent offender who didn't get caught selling anything, didn't um, have any personal drugs on my in my possession, didn't have didn't make a sale, no one complained to the police about me. I was just coming out of an apartment that had drugs in it. Now I knew what the apartment was, but I to me I was at the wrong place at the wrong time, and though I might have deserved some form of um, punishment, I don't think I deserved 15 years to life.
So you were 18 years old, and this occurred in Harlem.
This occurred in Washington Heights
Mm-hmm.
in 1987.
Now,
And,
go ahead.
I'm thinking, you know, they're going to understand that I was just a kid at the wrong place at the wrong time. And I might deserve some form of reprimand,
Right.
but I never expected to be getting 15 years to life for something like that, for a crime um, that really wasn't a crime. It was
So
just,
you didn't have any possession. You weren't selling anything. May I ask if you were
no,
actually participating in any drug use at on that moment?
no, I was not using drugs at all. So let me give you some background.
Okay.
I come from a family that was ravaged by drugs, mainly heroin. And when I was 15 years old, my dad died of a heroin overdose. My aunt died in 1983 from the AIDS virus from being an intravenous drug user. My uncle, who I'm named after, Robert, was a heroin user and was homeless. I had another uncle who um, was a drug addict and eventually became HIV positive and eventually died of AIDS. Um, so growing up and seeing that, seeing how it ravaged my family, it was something that I definitely never wanted to participate in. At 18 years old, I was going to be a father actually. And I was at a school and a friend at the school said, "Hey, you want to make more money because I know you're going to be a dad." And I'm like, "Yeah, I need money. This is going to be expensive."
Right.
And she said, "I can get you, you can make $1,000 a week." Back in 1987, that was like, what? So I said, I'm not sure, like I really have something against drugs and I don't think I'm cut out for that. She said, just have a conversation with my husband. So I said, okay. I met up with him and, I told him my hesitation. I said, look, not for nothing, but I don't know if this is something I want to do, even though I could really use the money. And he said, look, why don't you just stick around and see how this works? And you tell me after that whether this is something you think you can do. So I said, okay. I think I made that decision out of desperation because, my thinking was I don't want my child to grow up the way I had to. There were times when I was a kid that I had to eat sugar and bread sandwiches for dinner um, because my mother could not afford to buy any food. We were that poor. Um, if we had a piece of chicken, it was a gourmet meal. So I took the chance and I said, well, let me at least check it out. And it was that week that everything happened. And I was like, as I was in the apartment, I heard noise in the building and I'm like, this is not for me. I don't like this ruckus. I'm in Harlem,
Right.
and this is not something that I want to do. As I'm leaving the apartment, and and I had, first of all, I was in the apartment not to just see what it was about because there was nothing going on there. The apartment was holding drugs in it, and I was buying a crib in Washington Heights because they were cheaper for my child, who eventually was my daughter.
Right.
And he was like, look, put your books away because I had just finished coming from school. He said, you can leave it upstairs in the apartment and I'll take you to a place where you can buy something of quality that's pretty cheap. I said, all right, cool. He said, here's the key, go upstairs and just leave your books there. That's exactly what I did. As I was coming out of the apartment, I hear all these noises. And I'm like, what is that? So apparently, when I was on my way upstairs, this guy made a sale. I saw a guy sitting in front of the building and he made a sale on just somebody passing by who happened to be a cop
Mm.
and sold him one bottle of crack. Then the guy went upstairs. It was his last bottle. He goes upstairs and the cops call backup, and they chase him up the steps. As they're chasing him up the steps, and he goes up to the roof, I'm coming out of the apartment. They immediately pointed the gun at me and took me by the neck and put me in an empty apartment next door. And I'm like, whoa, like, what is this? And the guy went upstairs to the roof, and supposedly his complaint was that the police pushed him off the roof.
So
I never knew what happened to him. But then all the cops came and were trying to save this guy's life. And they did. He ended up having broken back and was paralyzed and stuff like that.
Wow.
And I was caught out of that apartment, coming out of an apartment that he had no association with. And I ended up doing 15 years.
All because of being in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Right.
Yeah. So there's so much to unpack there, right? Because one, there's a presumption of guilt, right? They see a black or brown person anywhere around a bad neighborhood, and they're automatically assumed guilty.
Yeah, I mean, that was the at the time, and it's still like that for people of color.
Oh yeah.
You are guilty until proven innocent, rather than the other way around.
Right.
And, in order for me to understand what was happening to me, the only thing that for me that was going to explain it was an education. And then I started realizing what was the impetus behind so many of us young Black and brown kids going to prison. At the time, I think, don't quote me on this, but I think in 1985, the New York prison population was somewhere at 17,000. When in 1987, when I started getting arrested, in the 3 years after that, it went up to 70,000. So obviously there was this concerted effort to incarcerate a bunch of kids of color. Not only that, but I think it was like 90% of everyone incarcerated in New York came from 5 neighborhoods in New York City: East Harlem, the South Bronx, Bushwick, Hollis, Queens, I believe, and one other one. And we were all from the same neighborhoods. Many times you be in prison, you'll say, oh, wow, I didn't know you were here. We all recognized each other because we were from the same place. It was almost like, we were hanging out at a bar or something like that.
Just completely destroying neighborhoods.
And destroying people of color. Now, when you send a man to prison or a woman to prison, what you're doing is not only are you sentencing them, but you're also sentencing their family. And so those 60 or 70,000 people, and some of them, a lot of them deserved doing some time. But there was a big majority of us that didn't deserve that time. It's not whether or not the person deserved to go to prison. It's whether or not the sentencing fit the crime committed. A lot of the crimes back then were economic crimes. People were hungry. They had nothing to eat. They had no education because the educational system was poor in those neighborhoods. Poor, it's absolutely poor. And many times, these people never finished high school or graduated from college, let alone, go to graduate school or anything like that. So, we were in, I think our generation was attacked feverishly and aggressively, and we were made to be cattle. It was called the prison industrial complex.
Right.
So one person equated for the system was worth about $200,000 a year. just one person. I mean, you get into intricate details about taxes coming to, you know, um, to communities that were basically of 1,000 people, 1,000 white people, and they were getting taxes also for the 2,000 people that were incarcerated instead of that money going to their neighborhoods that they were coming from.
Right,
Um,
right. Tax allocation, right? So the
right,
population of that area increases by 200,000 prisoners, and so they get more money.
right,
Meanwhile, the communities where they came from, they lose money because now their population is smaller.
right. So that was an issue, and I think, and when you look at that, then you want to say why. So most of my life, I've been exploring the why, and it's an ugly part of our history, and I think it's something that we don't talk about. Um, and I ended up doing the whole 15 years, you know, because they said I didn't have a right to challenge what was found in the apartment because I had no standing. But they used that same standing to give me possession of whatever was in the apartment, right? So
That
you're
doesn't
saying,
make any sense.
right, it doesn't make any sense. So they're saying, you know what, you have no right to contest anything found in the apartment because the apartment doesn't belong to you. But they also use that same logic to say you have no right to contest this illegal search and seizure because the apartment doesn't belong to you. I said, if the apartment doesn't belong to me, then I don't have any possession of what's in the apartment. The the answer to that never came. It stayed um, unanswerable, and I never got any relief from that. And after my case, they started um, convicting people of multiple um, laws just in case they needed to back it up.
Yeah,
So,
that there's the system has been so broken for so long, and even today you can point to laws and minimum sentences that are just way off, right? When you look at the statistics of how many, like I think it's like 1 out of 16 white men might see jail time, and I think for black it's like 1 out of 3, Hispanics like 1 out of 6.
right.
It's
But
ridiculous.
Pablo, it's not broken
Well,
because it works for
yes,
them.
yes,
So the system isn't broken. The
yes.
system is working for them. So there's a book by this Columbia professor. Let me see if I remember his name. Um, Ryman, I think, something Ryman. It's called, and what he said, I forgot the name of the book. I used to. So what he basically said, what appears to be broken really is not broken, but it's working for somebody else.
As
So he gave the
designed.
example of, right, looking at a mirror, looking at a mirror in a carnival, and the mirror is giving you these different images, but what you see is the image of yourself warped. And that's how the system is. I used to feel like I was locked up with people like Robert Chambers, um, um, David Berkowitz, Ronnie DeFeo from Amityville Horror, um, Robert Chambers, Central Park. He had sex with a girl in Central Park and ended up killing her. I was locked up with them, so that meant that we were the same. And,
Right.
you know, I never killed anything in my life outside of maybe an insect or something like that. Like it's it was incredible, and it started to dawn on me um, that it was a way of justifying harsh sentences if you all put us together and um, you don't look at us as individuals. You look at us as a whole,
Right.
and that was really difficult to accept. But I excelled when I was inside. I went from getting a GED to my first master's degree. I I helped start a theater workshop program. To this day is not only still alive 25 years later, but it has expanded to 7 other prisons. So I did a lot with my time there, but those are years that I can never get back. And
I think
I've been
that is a prime example of what could be, right? Instead
right.
of taking a young man who might have been, whether you were there at the wrong time, wrong place, wrong time, or whether you really did have, a minor amount of anything, of any possession, the answer is not, hey, 15 years in prison. That's not the answer.
It, it isn't. And I had the ability to do all these things without having to go to prison. All I needed was somebody, a mentor, an older person to tell me, hey, don't go left, but go right. I was a good kid. I'm trying out for, you know, Major League Baseball. I was invited to Yankee Stadium to try out. I I was an athlete. I was an artist. I went to art and design high school. I had all these things going on, and I actually um, signed up to join the Marines. All these little things that I could have done if I wasn't in a position where I was desperate. And I'm not blaming anybody for that desperation,
Right.
even though in the background there were people pulling the strings
Yeah,
to
and,
for what
and,
happened
and
to
yeah, I think that that's also where the discussion is today, right? Is we have to reform and rethink where money goes, because as long a long standing theory of mine is, if you really want to combat systemic racism, or racism in any sort of form or fashion, you have to give equity to the communities that have been tortured and robbed of their dignity and their economic opportunities, right? Because from the get-go, you were set up in a position where you were kind of put in a corner, and they said, "Hey, good luck," right? And through those systemic acts that are designed, right? Like you said, they are designed to kind of keep people down.
right.
The only, again, if all of a sudden you throw money at these communities that does have centers where you can get mentorship, centers where you can get help with your education, centers where they can say, hey, you know what, there's opportunity of work on this side of town or over here, there's other opportunities other than, there's nothing around. Hey, somebody's gonna look at you and say, hey, that's a prime target to kind of like, hey, come sell drugs, right? Because that's the easiest way to make money around here.
So our communities were attacked and things were taken away, where the only choice for many of us kids was to go to the street to make money. You know how many friends I know that went that route? I have a friend who went to prison who's now called Dr. Arroyo. How awesome is that? He's a PhD. So it's like, and many of my friends, I have at least 25 friends that I did time with that have masters, that are running multi-million dollar organizations, like really good people. And that story is not told. So,
Right. And again, that's the flip side, right? Instead of just sending people to prison, spend the money. It's cheaper, right? It's cheaper overall to get these people an education, get them set on their feet, and give them the opportunity to thrive. But like you said, the industrial complex of prison, there's too much profit there, right?
so I have a theory, and maybe it's a little controversial. And, you know, you always have to be careful because I don't want it to sound like a conspiracy because it isn't a conspiracy. To me, it's the truth. It's just something that is not talked about enough. So I whittled down why I went to prison, right? And it has a lot to do with the Ira Contra scandal, right? The exchange of guns for cocaine. It was sent to a couple of neighborhoods, right? It was California to Chicago and New York. Three places that had problems with crack in the 80s, in the early 80s, and eventually the late 80s and 90s. There was a guy named Freeway Ricky who was actually working with the CIA, and that's the person they funneled the drugs through. He became a multimillionaire. But that drug was making its way across the United States. And a lot of people got caught up because it was a quick way to get rich. When the person who really broke the story was the Seattle writer, I forgot his name, but the name of the article was The Pariah. And he ended up losing his job as a journalist. He got blacklisted. And in the article, he talked about the CIA funneling drugs to poor neighborhoods and creating this this disease that was spreading. I think they wrote a movie about it with what's his name? I don't know why it's like skipping my mind.
Yeah, I've heard of.
Oh, Blow, I think it was the movie Blow.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
Right. So when you get a chance, I want you to read the article called Pariah. I don't know if you can still find it. That to me answered everything. Answered everything I ever needed to know what happened to me. I used to have I have a saying. If I'm gonna get fucked, I'm sorry for the language.
No.
If I'm gonna get fucked, I want to know who's fucking me.
Right.
You understand? Because then it's easier to deal with. And and once I started knowing what was happening and who was behind it, then I was able to do something about it and write and write to different senators and different congressmen. It's because of us, our population that did time that time, where things are changing now, believe it or not. It's because we raised hell even though you didn't want to hear us, right? We we staged protest, and one time at Sing Sing we planned out a statewide um, strike. We're not eating the food, we're not using the phone, and that caused an uproar in the prison system because they weren't making money off of us, right? The food was going to waste. The phones, which was MCI at the time, they were charging our families an exorbitant amount of money, where at times we couldn't talk to our families because they couldn't afford to take our call. It was $20 to make one call, to have one call. And they would, I remember my mom telling me, "Pa, I don't know how I'm going to talk to you because these are expensive calls." And I said, "Look, I'll just write."
Right.
It was distinctly, engineered for us to lose that contact with our families. And for a lot of people, it was that way. And it was meant to break up families of color. And you see it now. You see it in the drug use. You see it, I mean, not so much in the prison now, but at one time it was worse than that. And let me tell you something. I did 15 years. I've been home for 20 now. I'm still affected by the time I did. Still, and then on top of that, I've, dealt with cancer and kidney disease. And, when you have all these things going, it's like, Jesus, like, when am I going to give up? Because I can't handle this shit anymore.
No, man. I can't imagine the the strength that it takes to not only have to endure something so unjust, but for so long, and then in addition, health problems, right? So I admire you incredibly,
Thank you.
especially the education, the realization of, you know, when you realize what the system is, that's the only way to kind of push back. So you don't fall into those traps. And it sounds like, man,
Naomi Klein wrote a book called Shock Doctrine. And to me, I think that's the Bible of what's happening in the United States. Trump is not a current phenomenon. He's not. That is something they've been working on since the 60s. And finally, Trump was able to infiltrate a system that was already extremely broken because, I hate to get political here, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to be bold. And I'm just going to say whatever the hell I want to say.
go for it.
Republicans have been social engineering since the 60s. They hide in their Republicanness, right? But they're really neoliberals who are trying to deregulate everything. And in my opinion, they're trying to recreate slavery all over again. And, that sounds really controversial, but if you take a close look, if you hold a magnifying glass to everything, that's exactly what they're trying to do because nothing succeeded or was more profitable than slavery. Let's take a look at Walmart, the richest family in the world, right? Probably the most successful company in the world. Yet they only pay their workers, what, $10 an hour?
Right.
12, maybe less.
Yep.
And yet they make over $1 billion of profits every single year, maybe more.
Oh yeah, way
And
more.
huh?
Way more.
Right. And a lot of these people that work for them can barely afford to pay their rent with the money that they get, or can afford to pay their way through school, or which is another way of replacing slavery.
Right.
If I can get you to owe me for the rest of your life, I own you. I own you. That's what the loans that we owe. Like, I own you.
Right. Absolutely.
Because forever you're going to be forever having to pay me because I created this thing called interest, and you're going to pay me my motherfucking money.
Yep.
And you're going to work for me. So by the time I'm finished paying everything and I'm making, let's say, a measly $15, that's why I don't believe in this $15 an hour kind of thing. I think it's empty because if you really do the math, in New York City, the minimum wage should be $33 an hour. I did the math. $33 an hour. That's what the minimum wage should be. And it's not, and $15 an hour, people are still not going to be able to afford the rent. Because once they bring it up to $15 an hour, you know what's going to happen? Landlords are going to say, oh, wow, you make more money, your rent is going to go up.
Yep.
Right. And it's cyclical. So you have to address the housing issue. You have to address, what it costs to take the train every week, or little things like that, or the housing, or the credit, the credit system that we have. It's unfair to people of color. And it's all geared, and it has all been manipulated behind the scenes by people who are afraid of losing their whiteness. And I don't say that as, in prejudice. I don't say that as someone who hates white people, because I don't hate anybody. But the reality is that ever since slavery ended in this country, there have been attempts and movements specifically to try and recreate slavery in this country. That's what you see every single day.
Without a doubt.
Every single day.
I actually, so a little bit about myself. I grew up in Kentucky and North Carolina, and the amount of white people questioning why black people are in jail in terms of why do they sell drugs? Why don't they just go get a good job? Why don't they just get good education? And I'm thinking, right. You're so blind. You're so blind.
Right.
They don't know that, you know, for centuries in this country, mainly black people have been, you know, oppressed from the get-go. Like you said, as soon as slavery ended, they had to find a new way to enslave them. And anyone
right.
who's not white, they felt like you were not entitled to those
right.
human rights. Whether it's Jim Crow laws, whether it's redlining, whether it's what you said, Walmart, they want to own you. If they
right.
pay you any more money, then all of a sudden the generation after you is going to be better educated and they won't have to work those jobs, right?
Right.
So why give them more money?
Right.
It's just a very sad and cyclical.
It's cyclical, and I think that we have to collectively look. I remember I was having a conversation with a friend of mine. I must have been like 21, 22 years old, and we're in our cells. He was like, he used to tell me, his name was George. I always wonder what happened to George. And we used to have these great conversations. And he used to tell me, you know, people always said, the man, the man, the man. You know, the man did this, the man did that. I want to know who the fuck is the man. And we would laugh about it because we were young. Who's the fucking man? What does he look like? And that always stuck with me. Like for my whole life, it stuck with me. And I said to myself, you know what? That's not a bad question. Who's the fucking man? So all my education was to try and identify who's the man. Now I know who's the man. And, you know, I'm going to sound partisan here. And, you know, we've been made to like, to say, oh, you're just taking the side. And, you know, that's what oppressors do, right? Oppressors make us feel like what we're talking about is just an argument coming from one side.
Mm-hmm.
But it has been the Republican Party, man. From Milton Friedman. Have you ever heard of him?
I have not.
Milton Friedman, look him up. He's the one that created the concept of the welfare queen who never existed. And he said that she was this black fat woman living like a hog off of welfare. She never existed. And people picked up that term and started applying to black people.
Yep.
For years. This was in the 70s. You know, Keynesian economics, that whole trickle down, you know, that trickle down economic theory, which was bullshit because nothing ever trickled down.
Right.
Ronald Reagan standing in the Bronx in front of an abandoned building saying, we need to fix it. And I forgot there was a sign painted on one of the buildings behind him. And he is wearing this eggshell suit. And he's talking about, we need to fix this because there are animals that are, all this language never got fixed. Never. And, you know, we were, you know, even though I think welfare is like 0.1% of the GDP, or, you know, the budget for this country,
right?
People are demonized, man, demonized, because, you know, what people get on public assistance, you could barely do nothing. You could barely do anything. I remember I was, you know, was on dialysis. I had just broken up with a girlfriend. I was living in New Jersey and I had nothing. I couldn't work and I was collecting $500 of unemployment, I believe. So I'm like, look, man, I can't live off $100 a month. My friend was like, why don't you just get public assistance for the meantime until you're feeling better and you can get a job? I said, you know what? I've for my whole life, I never wanted to go on public assistance, but I guess I need to go now. I went. You know how much they gave me as help
How much?
in food stamps? $16, 1 6
A month?
a month. A month.
Unreal.
I went to public assistance and I fucking pitched a bitch in front of everybody. I'm like, how dare you people do this to me?
That's an insult.
Like, how dare? Yeah, it's an insult. And I threw the card back at them and I'm like, you know what? Y'all could shove this shit up your ass. Because this is an insult. Who lives off of $16 a month? So those are all things geared towards you staying, at the bottom of the barrel, right?
Yeah, and
So
people buy into that so easily, right? Like, hey, who really deserves help? Who deserves an extra dollar? Who deserves food stamps? And it has been instilled in a lot of people's mindset that it's only lazy, pieces of shit that, receive welfare. And that
right,
couldn't be further from the truth. I think I saw the statistics. I took a class in poverty economics, and I think it was, and I may be wrong here, but it was around 90% of people that receive welfare are actually working. They're working.
right, because that goes further to show you about the slave economy that we have going on,
Right.
right?
So instead of
I'm
Walmart
just
picking up the
worried,
bill, they're like, hey,
right,
U.S. government, you pay them a little bit extra.
right, and we get nowhere, right? We get nowhere.
It's sick.
So it is sick, and that's one of the reasons why now that I'm going to get a little personal here, right? I haven't worked since June of 2019 because I can no longer work. I was on dialysis. In December of 2019, I tell my wife, look, you are being supportive, and I don't think this is something that's going to work. She didn't fight me back on it like I was hoping she would do. Like, look, I love you, and let's try and make this work. She didn't do any of that. She just said, okay, I'm out. And she left on the 31st while I was on dialysis. That month, I also got diagnosed with cancer, kidney cancer. I was by myself, struggling and feeling like this can't be possible, right? I used to have I used to get I still get $900 a month from disability. My rent is $1,250. My phone is $100. My cable is $180. My light bill, and so I never had money for anything. So my friend said, look, why don't you do a GoFundMe? And I raised money that way. I raised, I think, $10,000 for all of 2020. And it came in handy for some things. I was able to pay a couple of months rent. I was able to pay some bills that I fell behind on. I was fucked up. And then the hospital told me, you're no longer compatible with the person that was going to give you the kidney in 2019. And it was like my world crashed. And then she sent me a message. She said, look, I want you to know that no matter what, I'm going to still try to get you a kidney. I'm going to find a way. And then the hospital told her about a swap program where she can get into a swap and donate her kidney to somebody else. And then eventually somebody will donate their kidney to me. And that's what happened. And in October of 2020, I received a kidney from a woman in Seattle who worked for Alaska Airlines. She was this great person, and she gave me a kidney. And when we were finally able to talk, we talked on um, a messenger, video messenger. She started crying. She said, "Thank you for allowing me to donate to you." And I just found that to be an amazing statement. And for the first time in my life, I felt like, wow, somebody cares about me. And I was able to do so. Right now, I'm like minus $150 in my account. I don't have any money coming till April. We're in March right now. And it's all about me trying to kind of navigate around that. I'm hoping I can share my GoFundMe again to get me through at least May, where I can start working. I get my second COVID shot on the 17th of this month. And then 28 days after that, I can really get around. So, things are still rough. I'm still hopeful, but, I'm still struggling. And, even being on disability is not helpful. Like, I don't know how people can do it. Um, and that's what I'm talking about. And I'm no longer angry about it because I understand what's going on. I'm just hoping to get to a point where I can really, I'm 53 years old. Like I said before, I don't want to be that old man eating cat food just to survive. And, that's why I'm at Columbia now doing the Justice Through Crow program in hopes that I can break that glass ceiling for men and women who come home from prison and are only regulated to social work jobs, which I love helping people, but we only make but a certain amount of money. So that's been something that I have been dealing with now. So,
Well, I already said this, that, your strength is just unbelievable. And I think you're going to be an inspiration to anyone and everyone who listens to this. And obviously, if there's going to be another GoFundMe, you let me know. I will be more than happy to share that, from every outlet that I have. And to be honest, I mean, this conversation just reminds me of how lucky I am, because, I mean, even when I was growing up, I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood, and I was surrounded by drugs. I was surrounded by all that good stuff, and there were many times where I kind of wanted to dabble in that, right? Whether it's using it or selling it. But I was fortunate enough to have good enough peers around me that they literally told me, "Hey man, if you get in this, you're not getting out." And thanks to my parents who eventually forced me to go to college and all that good stuff, it's like, man, I don't know where my life could have gone, right? And instead I am where I am today, very comfortable, and I am more than thankful, and I admit it's a lot of luck, right? And my parents kind of knew the system that we were kind of getting ourselves into, because we're not from this country, but they obviously saw the oppression, the lack of opportunity, and someone like me, I had no choice but to take out student loans, right? They don't make it easy to get out of those situations.
Right, yeah.
And that's a whole different debate, right? Like, hey, why is it so expensive? And not only that, but why are people so against, forgiving those loans? I don't know. It's a whole lot of stuff, but again,
when you look at it, it's social engineering at its best, and
right.
This is why I tell you, this is not something that just started today or during the Trump administration. He is the result of their racist politics. Like, for a long time, Republicans, and I warned about this 15 years ago when Fox News would have these microaggressions on racism, and they would throw things out there, and it started before Obama, and then forget about it. When Obama became president, they went nuts, and you know, these people realize, hey, wait a minute, I'm racist, and now I have the power to express that. Let me
Right.
go for it. And Republicans have used that as a tool, right? They have they have taken a segment of the population and have manipulated them and um, got them to tap into their most racist feelings inside and have successfully divided this country in a way where um, I think it's gonna take a long time for us to recover from that, if we ever do recover.
What do you think it'll take to kind of, you know, make
I
a real
think
impact?
I think there's two things that we can do. I think one of them is we need to overturn Citizens versus United. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that.
Yep, that's basically unlimited amounts of money in politics, right?
Right. We have to remove that. And we also have to get rid of the filibuster, because what have Republicans have done with that regardless of whether they're in power or not in power, what they do, they have um, manipulated it where even though they represent the least amount of people in this country, they have gerrymandered, they have created laws where they are in power all the time, and we get nothing done. So whenever we want to govern, right? And I say we lightly because, actually, I didn't really vote for Biden. I voted for him because he was the only choice there for me to vote for.
Right.
But, you know, I wanted Bernie Sanders to win because I thought he was bold, and we need to have a bold, progressive movement where, you know, where these things don't get in the way, right? This
Yep.
filibuster thing, um, it should be 50-50 down the block, and whoever, um, and you should vote the way it is. Like this thing about, like, why would Trump, how is it possible Trump impeached twice, one, wasn't convicted twice for crimes that were obvious. And if it was me or you, Pablo, we would have been sent under the prison. You know what I mean? Like, this man is a traitor, committed treason. And to me, I really believe that he's a Republican. He's a Russian asset. It's obvious. And yet he gets away with. That's why every man who's been to prison, every man and woman who's been to prison, and they look at Trump, this is the reason why they get pissed off, because they said, if that was me and I did less, I sold the fucking drug because I was hungry, and I got 15 years for this bullshit. And here it is. This guy has killed people in the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
has has destroyed American policies, and has really did damage to our reputation across the world, and has made this country weak. And then on top of that, he attacked the Capitol, and this guy gets no fucking time. None whatsoever. It was like, yeah, it's okay. And not only that, on top of that, Republicans are saying, you know what? He's going to be the next president in 2024. Like, who the fuck are you dealing with? Like, who the
Right.
fuck are these people? So, and yo, this dude is a failure at everything he ever tried to do, man. I lived in New York my whole life. Like, the fact that when I heard that he was running for president, I'm like, this clown motherfucker, like, he ain't gonna win. And he won. You know why? Because he's the puppet that they manipulating behind the scenes. And Republicans get what they want
Yep.
when they want it because they know this asshole is going to do whatever they say, right? As long as he could profit from it in some way.
Yeah, and that was my biggest fear, is that he would just be just that, right? A puppet for the Republican Party.
And that's what he was. And guess what? Because they knew that if they sent somebody else up there who was um, less, who tapped in less with the, and was more aware of his standing in the public, then, Trump doesn't give a fuck how people see him. Doesn't. He cares about himself and will manipulate poor white people to think that he's one of them.
Right.
Imagine. You understand what I'm saying?
Yep.
That's a problem that we have in the United States. And this is the listen, we who were doing time in the 80s warned about this. And in the 90s, we warned about this. We screamed and yelled about the Republican Party, who, from George Pataki, I don't know if you know who that is. He used to be the governor of New York, and he wreaked havoc on men in prison. Havoc. And, we warned people about that party. Now I'm going to sound, I'm going to sound a bit partisan here, but I'm not trying to be partisan. I'm trying to point out that there's a segment of the American representatives who want to cause us damage and take us back to a time that we fought hard to get out of. And people like me are afraid of where that leads. We're afraid.
It's nowhere good. That's
Right.
for sure. And I completely agree with you. We need bold and radical change if we were going to snap out of this.
When Biden says, I'm going to reach across the aisle and I'm going to work in a bipartisan fashion. Yo, my man, don't you realize that they don't want to, excuse my language, they don't want to fuck with you?
Right.
That they don't care about you?
Right.
That they're not going to in any way join you in governing for the United States because that's not their thing, right? That's not their thing. They're not interested in that. So why are you going to try, right? Like, yo, okay, you don't want to govern with me? Step to the side. I'm going to do this on my own.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's one of my biggest, complaints about Biden is almost, not to say that he's unwilling, but he doesn't have, and I hate to say this, but he doesn't have the balls that Donald Trump had, right? Donald Trump went in there and said, fuck everybody, I'm going to do whatever I want.
Right.
And if the Republicans want me to do this, I'll do it. Who gives a shit?
Right.
Biden comes in and he's, making some good steps here and there, but at the same time, he's like, well, I don't know if I should, right? Maybe this isn't politically smart. Maybe. And it's like, dude, who cares? Help the people.
Right.
That's all we're asking. Help the people.
You're going to have to take an aggressive person, like somebody like AOC, somebody who's not going to be afraid to tell you, how it is and what it means for us, people of color. Like, we have to really be assertive about the positions that we take. And, man, I've done time with white people, Black people, Indian people, Chinese people, and the camaraderie that we all have is beautiful. It's beautiful. Like, we all love each other. I had a friend when I was at Sing Sing. His name was Curly. Obviously, Curly had no hair. He was bald, but we called him Curly. And Curly had a perforated tattoo across his neck. And then underneath it said cut here, right? And he had tattoos. He had racist things all over his arms. And I'm like 24, 25. And he said, hey, what's up, kid? I said, Curly, let me ask you a personal question. Are you a racist? He was like, I used to be. I used to be a skinhead. And I'm like, why do you hang out with just the black guys? He said, guess what? He said, because I realized how much of an asshole I was and how much I was misled. And once I got here, I realized that I was wrong about everything I ever thought about people of color. And he was so articulated about it. He said, so my job is now to really understand the things that I missed about people. And everyone loved him. And one day we were in a group together and he started crying to talk about this. He said, you know how silly and I feel? He said, when I get out, I'm going to get all these racist images off of my body because I no longer believe in this bullshit. I can't believe I went down that road.
It's funny how literally just conversations and meeting with people can completely change your comprehension and viewpoint of everything. Have you ever heard of Daryl Davis?
The name sounds familiar.
I believe he's a jazz musician. But what I like about him is that he's converted over 200 people out of the Ku Klux Klan. So,
oh yeah, I mean he had a show about it, right?
He might have. I know he's written about it and kind of, done different shows to kind of promote or, kind of talk about what he's done. But part of the reason that I even started this podcast is to kind of give people a different perspective of everything, right? I've had Republicans on the podcast. I've had Democrats on the podcast. I've had poor people, rich people, whatever you can imagine. And just this conversation right here can open up eyes, right? And so hearing that story about Curly, I mean, that's kind of what I wish for the world, at least for the United States, right? Is forget what you've been told about who's taking your money, who's taking your tax money, who's this, who's that. It's like, if you could choose, would you want your neighbor to be homeless, in prison, or would you want them to be happy, healthy, and comfortable living besides you, right?
Right.
And I think 99% of the people would say, hey, I want them healthy and happy besides me. Yet, for whatever reason, we live in this world where we just can't seem to break the cycle of enslavement, whether it's literally, 200 years ago, or what was it, like 150? It hasn't even been that long, right? It's ridiculous.
And think about there's still people that think that that low. I think it's I don't know if it's we're past conversation. I think we finally have to say, you know what, you are a person who I should not have any dealings with, like you're somebody that I should not just we correct it. We correct somebody when there's anti-Semitism. We correct somebody when they expressing racism, but you have a large segment of this population that they're in power and no one is going to address that about them because they're paying your check.
Yep.
They're paying you. And it's time for that to end. It's time for that to end.
Yeah.
I'm hoping, I'm 53 years. I'm going to be 53 in April. And I'm embarrassed to say this, Pablo. I have absolutely no retirement savings. None. I have to work till I'm 70. After suffering kidney disease and cancer and all that, I'm like, damn, I hope I can get to 70. But what's going to happen when I get to 70? I have to still work and save money. I have no money saved because everything I had, the little bit of money that I had, went towards me getting better. right? Or paying for my rent, um, which, because I didn't have any job or anything like that, and the disability didn't pay me enough to at least survive and pay my rent, and not have to worry about getting food. Um, and it's horrible. And I thank God for me being able to do the GoFundMe, you know, in October when I got the transplant, because so I did the GoFundMe because I was like, you know what? I'm finally gonna put my ego down and I'm gonna ask for some help. And I got to raise I think $11,000. I was hoping to get to 20 because I think that would have taken me to. What's up? So I was hoping to get to 20. Not sure if I'm going to get there, And I'm almost afraid to share it again because I'm like, oh my God, people are suffering. I take that into account as well. And so I don't know. I guess I'll share it with you. Hopefully you can send it around and maybe I can get a little help. But I think, I shouldn't have had to do that with the experience and the amount of years I was working. But because the way the system is geared, once you don't work, you are not going to.
It's so easy to fall behind.
Yeah, because once you get sick, it's hard. It's really difficult to keep up with your bills, to keep up with life in general, especially if you're on your own, like I am. I've been, by myself for a very long time. So,
Well, yeah.
at some point, I'm hoping to be able to rectify that in some way.
You send me the information. I'll make sure and share it. And again, it's inspirational, everything that you've done, despite everything that's occurred. And from everything that you've said, it sounds like you're going in the right direction, right? And I can only assume that you'll end up in a good spot. And the fact that you ran 7 miles,
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
that's very impressive.
Well, I thank you for that, and that's kind of a way of me celebrating how good I feel. I get my second vaccine on the 17th, and then 28 days after that, I can start really thinking about work. I'm gonna finish the class at Columbia in May, and I think they're gonna help me find a job working for either Amazon or Google or some tech company, and I'm hoping to be able to make some really good money, so that way I can be aggressive about saving for retirement.
Well, that's an excellent plan because, yeah, I mean, Python and all of those languages, that's the future, and that's where the money is. And like I said, I do think you're going to end up in a really good spot. And to be honest, I would love for you to come back in the future and kind of give us an update.
Hey, I'm here for you, man. I got these 2 dogs. They they count me, so
Sounds like they want to be on the podcast too.
yeah, it's like they're tiny. I think together they're like 5 pounds.
That is tiny.
You know what I mean? So
Well, I will let you go. Again, I can't thank you enough for making the time and for willing to come on and have a conversation with me.
well, thank you, Pablo, for doing this for all of us. Actually, thank you for telling these stories, and I gotta actually tap into your podcast. So if you could send me that information, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely.
'Cause I'm a podcast type of guy, so it's good to to see you doing this. And congratulations to you as well. I know this is something that that reaches people. I don't know if you have information on how many people you reach or anything like that, but it's good to see another Latino doing well and doing these type of things. So
yeah, man, we are way underrepresented in too many things, man.
we are.
But yeah, hopefully that changes over time, and step by step, man, we're gonna move forward.
Right.
All right. Well, again, thank you, and I'll talk to you soon.
You got it, brother. And I'm gonna text you the GoFundMe, and do me a favor, text me your site, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. God bless you, brother.
Thank you, man. I'll talk to you later.